Welcome everybody who's joining in. Great to see you on this Saturday morning. Just a heads up that we will be recording this panel discussion and we'll post it online for people who didn't get to attend. So just so you're aware of that. And we'll start the event in a few minutes as soon as a few more people get on. That's correct. There's a note saying that our mics are muted right now. Yet this is a webinar, so the attendees, the mics will be muted for the event. But if you have any questions, and we will be opening up to the attendee for questions from the attendees later on in the discussion. So we'll be asking you to use the Q&A field or the chat field to communicate and ask questions. One more minute. And I see we have attendees from both Chicago and we have some of our other regions represented as well. So welcome to everybody. Let's see, we have someone from Pennsylvania. So welcome. All right. Give it one more minute, and then we'll officially get started here. All right, I think we're going to get started. So welcome again to all our attendees from both Chicago and from other areas within the chapter, the Chicago Midwest chapter. My name's John Owens. I am the NATAS Chicago Midwest president, and we are engaged in a panel discussion / workshop today on internships. It's another in a series of what we call our Meet the Board discussions. We have a couple of members from the Board of Governors here today, along with some representatives from the universities in Chicago. Before we get started, I always like to encourage high school seniors or high schoolers and college students to apply for NATAS Chicago Midwest Foundation scholarships, which are awarded to college seniors, graduate students, graduating high school students, studying broadcast journalism, production, communications. We've awarded over $500,000 in scholarships over the last quarter century, and some high profile names like the White House correspondent for NBC, Peter Alexander, Mike Lowe from WGN, and others. So for more information on how to apply and how to donate to these scholarships, go to our website, chicagomeonline.org, and more specifically /students/scholarships. So be sure to do that. Welcome again. So in the next hour and a half, we're going to hear from 4 area media professionals who offer advice on applying for broadcast related internships. I'd like to remind people, I mentioned this when we started, but all our attendees are mute, but you will have the opportunity to communicate with our panelists. We're going to open up the floor for questions after our discussion begins. So if you have specific questions, please use the Q&A function or the raise hand function or the chat field to submit your questions. So let's meet our panelists. We have Pablo Alfaro. He is the Creative Services Manager for Telemundo, WSNS TV. We have Nick Blumberg, a reporter and producer for WTTW. And then from the universities, we have Jennifer Halperin. She's the longtime career and internship advisor for Columbia College. And Michael Limon, the internship and career coordinator for Loyola University. So welcome to you all. And first, I'd like to just have each panelist give a little bit more of a biography about who they are and talk about their involvement with internships and internship programs. First, I'd like to talk to the folks in the broadcast world, specifically Pablo and Nick. Pablo, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. And well, yeah, like you said, I'm the Creative Services Manager for Telemundo Chicago. We are sister station to NBC and NBC Sports. So we're not a duopoly anymore. We're a triopoly, if I can say that. I started with my internships in '95. And the first internship that I had was at Univision Chicago. I was interested because my native language is Spanish, and very familiar with the programming. So I started my internship in '95 when they were at WTTW. Then during my internship in '95, they moved to Fairbanks Court, which is downtown right now, downtown Chicago, almost right in front of NBC Tower. I had a blast in my internship. At that time, I thought I wanted to be a journalist. My internship was about interviewing people and whatnot. I loved it. I loved the internship, but I liked the technical aspect to it. So having said that, finished my other 2 years of college. Before that, I had some other internships with City of Chicago and some other places here in Chicago. And when I had my last internship, because I took like about 4 internships, I had applied to Univision Chicago for an assistant job, assistant to creative services. And they interviewed me and they ended up hiring me, which at that time I was finishing college. They waited for me. I jumped in. I didn't care what I was doing. I just want to get my step in, right, in the industry. And that's how I started. I started as an assistant or coordinator for creative services. Then I started, editing a little bit more. They made me a producer, topical producer. And then I was doing commercials, and suddenly I was doing, a lot of things. After 3 years, I was offered a position at Telemundo, which at that time, it wasn't NBC yet. So I thought it was a great opportunity as an executive producer at Telemundo. And so I jumped in, and I've been there for the past 20 years. So it's a great experience. I've had to do everything in my career, which I love. I've done camera, I've done obviously editing, producing, directing, robotic cameras. I've done field producing. I've done work in front of camera. I've done everything. I can say I've done everything, and I love it. I love it. I just love this industry.
So you're the example of someone who used an internship to start a career at a specific station, right?
Yes, yes. And I took the opportunity, I guess that my first language was Spanish, and I really thought that that was my calling in the industry, to work with the Hispanic people. So I was very focused since the beginning where I wanted to be. It didn't matter where, though, I discovered in the path that what I really wanted to do. Um, but I just want to jump in specifically to a Hispanic audience.
It's a wonderful story. Nick, can you talk about what you do right now at WTTW and your experience with internships at WTTW? And did you start off as an intern yourself?
I didn't start off as an intern there, but I have a similar path from, an internship to a part-time job to a full-time job. So I've been at WTTW Channel 11, we're Chicago's PBS station, working on the news side as a reporter producer for a little over 6 years now. Originally came aboard as a segment producer for Chicago Tonight, our nightly program. And kind of the newsroom and the job have evolved over the years. We have much more of a digital presence now. We have 2 weekend shows. We have kind of content that goes throughout the day parts, and much more of a focus on our digital first content on web and social. So have expanded into that, and have expanded into doing a mix of both reporting and producing. So some behind the camera, some in front of the camera. Some purely, just writing digital first articles. And I'm from Chicago originally, but I went to the Cronkite School at Arizona State. And while I was in, I arrived at journalism school thinking I wanted to be a writer, thinking I wanted to just do print or digital, and got involved pretty quickly with the campus radio station, which I thought was fun and which I liked, and which I thought would just be kind of a fun extracurricular, and ended up getting really involved and really loving it there, and had a couple great advisors who really kind of guided me toward doing broadcast internships in college, because they said, well, this seems like something that you're naturally drawn to, even if it isn't what you think you want to do. So, take these opportunities and take these internships as a chance to kind of explore that. So I did, I interned in TV and radio stations in the Phoenix market, mostly public media, because I kind of had an interest in that. And I ended up doing an internship at Phoenix's NPR station and did a semester there. And then they asked me to stay on as a part-timer, and was there for my senior year as a part-timer, and then ended up getting a job with them full-time after I graduated. So it was sort of another example of getting your foot in the door and sticking around and maintaining those connections, and kind of looking for like, okay, what else can I do? What do you want me to do? So that's how I ended up getting my first full-time broadcast job. And things are a little weird right now at TTW in terms of internships, just because a lot of it was based on in-person work. So we have a little bit of digital internship work, but in general, we usually have 2 folks, who do 2 days a week. So we have like a Monday, Wednesday, and a Tuesday, Thursday intern, and they kind of float around and they work with a lot of different people, and they work on the daily tasks of the show and the site, and all sorts of different things. And then sometimes they'll also get assigned to a specific project. So I've worked with, I've overseen interns who have been working with me on like voters' guides to an election, or on news documentaries that we've done, or on field producing a big shoot. So we definitely have a lot of opportunities for folks to get involved and work with, work specifically with producers and reporters on projects.
So the connections you made as an intern have definitely helped you throughout your career. Is that a correct statement?
Very much so. And it's, still folks that I've kept in touch with over the years. And I think, the farther along you get in your career period, but I think particularly in a media career, you realize how important those are, and how those, one thing leads to the next. And you can, look 10 years back and realize all the, there's a through line there. There are connections there that you didn't necessarily make at the time, but it's like, oh yeah, this person that I met in 2009 ended up helping me, make the connection to get a job 6 or 7 years later. And I didn't realize that would be the case, but it is very much an opportunity to make those connections. And as I said, to sort of hone your interests. I think it was a great chance for me to figure out what it was that I wanted to do, and which part of news was a natural fit for me, was most appealing to me.
So Michael, you're the internship and career coordinator at Loyola. I was wondering if you could talk about, the types of internships that you guide students towards, and just in general, why are internships important?
Thank you for having me this morning. I sure appreciate it. Yes, we try to guide our. I'm the internship and career coordinator for the School of Communication. So we drive our interns toward communications and media internships. We focus on those as much as we can for PR and advertising, film and digital media, print, broadcast, all of our major fields. We try to drive interns toward internships in those areas. We have interns now at wide-ranging places such as Kinetic Worldwide, Kemper Lesnick, Plan B, Avail. A lot of marketing internships are available right now, so we try to make sure that that we let interns know about those. We always tell interns we can't get the internship for you, but we can guide you to the openings. And so we post as many of those as we can on our internal job site, soccareers.com, which funnels communications and media internships to that site where they can see those opportunities. And that's our main job of guiding them that way.
And Jennifer Halperin, she's the career and internship advisor for Columbia College. Jennifer, in advancing what Michael was talking about, first of all, talk about your department and what internships you're responsible for, and then talk about what organizations are typically looking for interns.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. I've been excited about internships since I was in college. So even though we're going back many decades, I distinctly remember my own internships in journalism as being so exciting. And I just learned so much, and they were so key to me just making my way into the world of journalism. Although I wasn't in broadcast, I was in newspapers and magazines. So I always had an eye out for interns at the organizations that I worked at, how I could help them or advise them. And then when I moved around the US a little bit just for different jobs. And when I came back to Chicago and I started to teach as an adjunct at Columbia, and a position open for a full-time journalism internship advisor, then I applied because I knew what a big difference internships had made in my life. I work with journalism, advertising, creative writing, public relations, social media, and digital strategy students. So a lot of the writing oriented students. And what I've come to find that I pass along to students I work with is that even if a student is very set on a broadcast journalism career, there are many other internships they can do, perhaps earlier on in college. Anything writing oriented tends to put them in good stead for some of the broadcast related internships. So in the 15 years that I've worked at Columbia, we've had interns at ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox. We have had them at WTTW. WCIU, and I have passed along to John Owens a list of some sites that you can check, and I can go into some more detail about the advice I give about searching. There have been, a slowdown in the broadcast internships. Some of our students had their internships canceled last summer, and this has been difficult. But what I heard some great advice from somebody who's working in broadcast journalism, who is an on-air reporter, who said that although it was her reel that ended up getting her a job, her experience as an intern helped her excel at her job. So I am always touting the benefits of all kinds of internships for journalism students.
Now, as you mentioned, there are all kinds of internships, but in general, what's a typical internship in the communications field today? Is it more common to find a paid internship or an unpaid internship? And that's why this is for anybody on the panel, specifically Michael or Jennifer, but anybody on the panel can answer.
Yeah, I still think certainly in broadcast, the majority of internships are paid. There are some that are not, but the majority are paid, and we do our best to try to direct students toward those internships. Our point is internships should have value beyond what you learn, and if the company values that internship, they will do their best to make it a paid internship rather than an unpaid internship. And so that's where we try to guide our students. Now, that said, there are some internships out there that are just so outstanding. They learn so much. They take a lot away from the internship, that if it's unpaid, that's fine. We'll post that internship as well and direct students toward that. So that's what we try to do.
Michael, or I'm sorry, Pablo and Nick, are paid internships common at public television or at Telemundo?
Yes, NBC, Universal, yes, they are paid. That's great because at my time they weren't. so yeah, and it's a good pay, you know, for an internship. I think, you know, students get so much out of the internship. So, you know, they help a lot. So yeah, might as well get paid, right?
Yeah, ours have not always been, but it's actually something that some of us internally pushed for, because I think it's important. It's important to recognize the value that interns bring to the organization. I'm also pretty skeptical of when organizations don't want to pay their interns, because I think there is sort of a, you know, a gap or an inequity or inequality in journalism in terms of, you know, it's not an industry where you're necessarily going to make a ton of money. And unfortunately, that advantages people who come from a better to do background. And I don't think that should be the case. I think everybody, you know, we need a diversity of perspectives, and we need a, you know, diversity of backgrounds. And you shouldn't have to come from a lot of money to get involved in journalism. And to tell someone, hey, you have to come in and work 20 hours a week for free, I don't think is necessarily a fair trade-off. And I know too, sometimes you can, you know, you don't have necessarily as much negotiating power as you did, say, if you were starting a job. But, you know, if it's an unpaid internship or if it's a low paid internship, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking, is there a way to get some sort of a stipend or you know, a transportation allowance? Like, will you buy me a monthly venture pass or something? I mean, if there's something that you can ask for, I think that is worth doing. And we also have some, you know, kind of beyond the, once you get a step beyond internships, we have several fellowship programs, which are usually a little longer term and which are paid, and which often go to former interns. So that can be kind of a great second step, is to land a fellowship, some of which are for current students and some of which are for recent graduates.
Mm-hmm. How can somebody find out information about a fellowship?
And in our case, they are posted on our jobs page, and our the person who oversees our internships for the newsroom is also involved in the hiring process for that. I'm happy to connect anyone with her if they're interested in learning more, because those are essentially a part-time or full-time temporary job. But yeah, that's we have, you know, we post it on our employment page when those come up. I don't know that we have a good resource in terms of, you know, showing like the list of all of them, and when they come up, some of it is funding dependent, which is a phrase you hear a lot in public media. But yeah, we've got several different fellowships. And I'm happy to connect you with if you're interested in.
And also attendees note that Jennifer posted on the in the chat field a list of networks where internships are offered. So please copy that information down. There's a number of stations, including ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and then WCIU in Chicago, among others, that have internships available. Now, how can Nick sort of touched on and Pablo about how they used their internships to advance in their fields. A question for the entire panel: how can interns make the most of their experience?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that's one of the keys, right? Being interested, wanting to do, what you want to do. So I think, there's a perception where interns don't do anything. In my department, I'm so happy about interns that I put them to do a lot of stuff, to the point where I tell them, okay, I put them along with someone, with a producer, topical producer, and I tell them, but in 2 weeks, I want you to start doing this. And by the end of the internship, I want you to do topicals, like complete, like, I don't want to guide you. I want you to know the whole process, from talking to news about what the news of the day they are, to writing the topical, obviously, get it approved, to finding the footage, to editing, and to put it on the air. And they're very excited about that, but I've also had interns where they're not really interested, and at the end of the internship, they're like, no, you know what, I loved it, but this is not what I want to do. I want to do something else, and that's totally okay. That's why, internships are so good, because sometimes you work for the first 2-3 years in college, like learning about all these things, but when it comes to hands-on, you end up saying, I love it, or I don't like it. I want to move on to something else. So, I think it's up to the student that want to take advantage, and the interest that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage, when you start off your internship, there's generally going to be a certain set of tasks and responsibilities that you are assigned. And I think what we're looking for is, folks who demonstrate that they are going to take this seriously, that they are going to pay attention, that they are going to work, hard at this, and try to pick up those, whatever the basic tasks of the internship are, quickly. And once they do that, or not, not unreasonably quickly, but it should not take you the full course of a semester to learn whatever sort of the basics of the job are. And from there, I think it especially if you are at an organization where they're kind of looking to identify that sort of talent, people notice that you can demonstrate those abilities. Some of it is in the way that you carry yourself, in terms of professionalism, in terms of volunteering for work. I think that's, again, not unreasonably, not stretching yourself thin, but there are often, down points in the day. This is easier when you're in an in-person setting, but I think talking to your supervisor, talking to the different reporters or producers, or whoever the different jobs are in the organization for which you're interning, ask them for work, ask them what they need help with. Ask if you can shadow them for a couple hours one afternoon. I think a lot of what I've gotten out of internships was observing the different ways in which people work and kind of picking up best practices from there. It wasn't even necessarily something that was intentional, like, okay, they sat me down and they talked me through, here's how I do this, 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 and this. It was just observing people in their professional environment, helping them with the tasks that they maybe assigned me to do if I volunteered for it. And I really got a lot out of that in terms of how to approach the work. So I think yeah, try and pick up whatever the basics are and raise your hand and ask what else you can do or what else you can get involved in. Sometimes the answer might be, we don't have anything right now. But, you know, as someone who works with interns, I remember that. And that is someone who I'm going to go back to when I need assistance with something.
Yeah, and I would advise students to take as many internships as they can, because that's the only way you're gonna see first if you like the field or what field you like in the industry, and also, you know, if they're at a station, let's say they're only at creative services or only at news, you know, to ask for permission to go into another department for a day to shadow, you know, a producer, to shadow a reporter, a photographer, you know, just to learn a little bit more and to get, you know, that experience as well.
Yeah, to follow up on what Pablo said earlier, two great things always happen in an internship. One is that you work the internship, you do crazy things, you work with crazy people, you work crazy hours, and you decide that you love it. And this is something that you want to pursue and something that you want to do going forward. The other outcome is that you work with crazy people, you work crazy hours, you do crazy things, and you decide that you hate it, and so you don't pursue that. But by doing it on an internship, you've invested, you know, 10 to 15 weeks instead of taking it as your entry-level job and moving halfway across the country to take your entry-level job and then realizing it's not for you. So that's one way an internship can be so invaluable, is just to test the waters of what truly interests you and what might be your career going forward.
Yeah, I would echo that 100%. I think one of the most promising broadcast journalism students that I worked with, and like I said, 15 years at Columbia, did an internship at CBS that she had applied for several times and did finally get CBS Chicago. And from that internship, learned that this was not a career path that was going to work for the life. Just in talking to the journalists working there, she knew it wasn't something that was going to fit with the life she had planned, and she went into another career. She's doing great. She's got a terrific human resources career, but she did learn that from her internship. So I agree 100%.
So should students avoid unpaid internships, or what are the unpaid internships that students should accept? And this is for the panel.
Well, I have what might be kind of an unpopular view on it, because in the years that I've worked helping students find internships, within the broadcast world, I've watched them go from unpaid when I first started, at least in the Chicago area, to paid. That was terrific. It did reduce the amount of interns that a station was able to take. There were, you know, terms where a station had 5 of our interns, I think at NBC one semester, just from our school. And I'm sure there were plenty from Loyola and the other schools at the time, but that shrunk then to just a smaller number of interns, just for budget reasons. But what I found over and over, despite being on panels and moderating panels and listening to panels where professionals tell students not to do unpaid work, that even they themselves, when asked, okay, well, how did you get your start in these competitive careers? They would talk about, well, you know, at first I, you know, did what I could, even if I had to work for free. So there's a little bit of a, I don't know, I'm groping for the correct word for that balance of what you're looking for. When I talk to students who are freshmen or first year and sophomores, and many of the broadcast specific internships that I've come across are geared toward juniors and especially seniors, sometimes even people when they've graduated, then to build a very solid resume, when we come across opportunities that might involve opportunities to strengthen their writing, like I said before, things that might get them published, and that might not be super intensive on time, but aren't paid, then I look for ways for other incentives along with perhaps asking, once you're solidly in there, is there a way for a stipend, or is there other perks? But doing an internship for academic credit can help lessen the pain of doing an unpaid internship. Sometimes some of those, what I call starter internships, don't ask for very many hours a week. So that can be a way to bolster your resume as someone who's serious about improving their writing and is very interested in journalism, as well as the accompanying, like the creative services portions of stations, where you're using a lot of the same skills, but you're serious about being part of a media organization. Those can be investments that are very valuable in a student's later career. You're putting in an investment of those couple of months, and what you've got in the long term is that perhaps it's led you to be a more competitive candidate for the paid internships. I don't say this easily. I don't like the idea of unpaid internships or people working for free, but because I have seen over and over the reality of who's getting hired in these paid internships, I can't help but at least offer these this advice that I've picked up over the years to the students I work with. And I do want to mention that there are sometimes groups, even within Chicago and elsewhere, that will provide funding if a student's school themselves doesn't provide funding for an unpaid internship. It's worthwhile to look into from funding from other groups. And that's my take on unpaid internships. I know that it's not everybody's.
And
And
what are
I
you?
think the idea, oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I think the idea too, that if you can do something that, that is unpaid, that is going to help advance where you're going, and it is less of a commitment of time, I think that's a lot more of a, I think that strikes a nice balance in terms of okay, well, maybe it's, 5 or 10 hours a week. It's something that I can handle in addition to whatever the student is already doing. And I think too, one thing that I would encourage students to do if you're trying to debate whether to take an unpaid internship or just whether to pursue an internship in general, talk to either someone from your school or try to talk to the internship coordinator. I mean, generally, they're going to respond positively to someone who takes the initiative to take a few minutes to send them an email and ask them what the internship is like, because I think that will help you to decide, ask them, what are the commitment, what's the commitment in terms of hours? What are the responsibilities? What are the opportunities that I get to work on? Sometimes postings for internships are super detailed and it will tell you all that, and that can guide your decision making. Sometimes the posting is like, hello, X organization is looking for an intern, please apply using this form. So I think if the more information that you're armed with, the better able you are to make those decisions about when to pursue an internship and when to take an internship. And I don't think, I would be surprised if an internship coordinator responded negatively to having that sort of, as long as it's, polite and professional and appropriate, they can answer an email. And I don't think that's unreasonable to try and get more information.
Yeah, to follow up on what Jennifer said, if an intern, most of our majors require an internship before you can graduate. And so if you're lacking that internship and there's a paid internship out there that meets the criteria for academic credit, by all means, consider that internship, because it will pay off. It could pay off down the road. We definitely try to guide students toward paid internships, but there are circumstances with academic credit and other issues that it could be worth taking an unpaid internship. So don't close the door on anything.
Nick brought up a time commitment. In terms of a time commitment, how many hours should an intern work a week? What is acceptable, and when is it too much?
I know that in NBC Universal, they can only work about 35 hours a week, up to 35 hours. They could work less. There are weeks where, there are events and we have so much work, and, they're probably gonna do 42, 43 hours, but that's okay. But in a regular week, it should be about 35 hours.
Does that sound accurate to everybody else? 35?
Yeah, and I mean, I think there are restrictions. A lot of it is sort of in terms of, at what point do you cross into being a full-time employee too, just from an HR, benefits perspective. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably about an appropriate upper limit. I think it's, at our shop, it's generally about 20 hours a week. So it's sort of an average part-time job where you're working, and perhaps not even 20 full, but you've got 2 8 or 9 hour days. Because I think it's, especially if it's an internship geared toward students, it should be something that you can still do while meeting your, making your classes and doing your homework and all your academic responsibilities. But again, that's a question that is something that you need to determine when you are deciding whether to apply for or take an internship, because there are some that are 5 or 10 hours and there are some that are 35 hours, and the 35-hour ones might be fantastic and a great learning opportunity, but it also has to fit into your schedule. Because I think, I've also seen interns who come in and are so overscheduled and so overburdened, and they're taking a ton of credit hours, and they've got a part-time job, and they're also writing for the campus paper, and they're doing an internship, and they're doing some writing work on the side for another organ. And it's like, okay, I love the hustle, but something's got to give, because very few human beings have the capacity to do that many things as well as they can. So you kind of got to determine, like, I always push people to take all these opportunities and to take advantage of stuff and do as much stuff as you can, but don't necessarily do it all at the same time, because you want to do the things that you're doing well.
Most of the companies that we have partnerships with are willing to be flexible on those numbers of hours. It's so important to negotiate it up front. And most of them will even mention in their job description that we'll work around your schedule. I mean, if you got the goods on your resume and in your cover letter that they want you, that's your opportunity to negotiate the hours that fit your schedule, rather than, as Nick said, go in and get overscheduled and have a bad outcome.
Jennifer just posted, in addition to the station, some journalism groups that offer special partnership internships with news organizations. So attendees, please look at the chat field for all of these different organizations that do that. Michael brought up the term negotiate. And that's something that prospective interns might not realize that they have the power to do. Can you talk about that, and how how someone would negotiate specifically hours and days when they can work? It obviously would come during the initial interview, or when that intern is hired, I assume. And that's for anybody on the panel, about the idea of negotiating for a prospective employer with regards to internship hours.
I think most of the time, and in my experience, has to do with your supervisor, as the intern and the supervisor. And the intern has to be very clear up front, how many hours they can work, whether it's 10 hours, whether it's 20 hours, or up to 40 hours. But I think it has to be very clear at the beginning, and then obviously, and in my case, we're lenient to, if the student needs to work on their final exam or project for 2 days, and they cannot make it in 2 or 3 days, that's okay. That's fine. We're willing to work along with them.
Yeah, I think as a couple folks have said, the idea of being upfront in terms of your availability is, don't just say yes to whatever you're offered. I mean, when you go in, whether it's a phone screen interview, or if you go in person, or, do something on Zoom these days, let the coordinator, let your potential supervisor know, yes, I have class on this day from this time, so I think I could be available these 2 days or these 3 days between this window. And I also think it's good in terms of in some ways it's good training for future job interviews. And, one of the things when you're starting a new job is, especially once you're into your professional career and into your adult life, like we all have things scheduled out. We all have plans coming up later on, not so much these days, but, hopefully again soon. And you want to go in and say, okay, I've got spring break coming up this day, and I was hoping to go visit my family. I've got, midterms this week and finals this week, and I've got a project that I have to work on this, look ahead. Don't just think about it in terms of, oh yeah, I have classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so I can do Tuesday, Thursday. Look ahead over the course of this semester, because coordinators might not like if they get a surprise a little later on down the road and they find out that, wait, you're going to be gone this week and you're going to be gone this week. It's not a deal breaker, but it is information that you want to make available upfront. And I think before you agree to do an internship, be honest with yourself about your availability. Take a look ahead as to when you can and can't work, and be upfront in the interview about that. And yeah, if they say, well, we really want you to do 3 days of this, you can tell them that, look, I'm really interested and I want to do this and I'm willing to work as much as I can around that, but I can only do these 2 days. That's not a make or break. That's being honest about your schedule.
I'd like to encourage all the attendees to submit questions to either the Q&A field or the chat. Use the chat function to submit questions, because we're going to open up the floor for questions from attendees when we start to get these questions. So please think of some questions that you can ask our panelists. A question for both Nick and Pablo: what should an intern expect to do at a station like a WTTW or WSNS? Is there hands-on experience that they'll get? I know unions play a role in some shops, so how much editing can they do? How much shooting can they do? And can they do any on-camera stuff? What should they expect when they start at a WTTW or WSNS?
So generally, the folks who come aboard and work for us, kind of the baseline of tasks are, we have an hour-long nightly news show, which is a mix of panel discussions, talk segments, and field packages, either live hits or pre-recorded things like that. So a lot of it is making sure, again, not so much right now, but making sure we're getting people in and out of the studio. Do we have all the releases from the guests? Are they in makeup on time? Is everyone out on set who needs to be? Is everyone, do all the on-air folks have their scripts? Do the directors have their rundown? So they're really an integral part of making sure that everyone has, for that 7 o'clock show, all the information that they need, that all the scripts get out, that the rundowns get out, that the guests get where they need to go, that they have a great deal of hands-on responsibility in terms of the logistics of an hour-long nightly show where we might have 6 or 8 or 10 people coming in and out of the studio. So they get a lot of work there, and they're they get training and they get to ramp up there, but they get thrown into that pretty quickly. And it's great too. I really like that aspect of it, because I think they are skills that translate to a lot of different stations. They're skills that translate, even beyond broadcast news. There are also opportunities to work with reporters and producers sometimes. We're a union shop, so we don't shoot or edit our own packages, but we do the low res edits, so the initial pass of stuff. So they can work some on that. They get opportunities in terms of cutting video and writing headlines. We do a couple blocks of sort of 30-second VO, VOSAT type headlines throughout the show. They get opportunities to write there. And then, as I said, if we have a more complicated field shoot, like a field interview, for example, we'll often have an intern come along with that just to help us make sure everybody's, again, where they need to be, and they'll get to see how the crew works setting up for a remote interview. They'll get to see the production process that goes into it. So it is a fair amount of hands-on work. There are also some, there's some scanning and printing and data entry, and, there are some more, kind of just office work related tasks, but it is all related to the show and to the news product. There's no running to get the EP coffee every morning. It is, you are doing hands-on work.
Yeah, I would have to say yes. So at NBC Telemundo, where we have, I believe it's 5 unions, 5 different unions. So definitely a union shop. But fortunately, my department is non-union. So if you come to work for me, I will put you to work. I'll take advantage of that. No, but yes, I I I do think that or in my department we do, you will be hands-on, you know. And I guess that's a good question when you first interview for an internship, whether it's a union shop or not, whether it's what will you be doing, because you could be, interning for the greatest station on earth, but you'll be sitting down, you know. So I guess it also changes, from station to station, and what departments are union and what departments are not. So in my experience, or my department, we're not. So they'll be hands-on. They'll be hands-on, even if we have to shoot stuff and they know how to shoot already, and they know how to edit, that's a plus. If they know how to write, or they can, they'll be learning all that anyway. But yes, I guess that's a good question to ask at the beginning of your, or or during the interview. Is this department that I'm applying for, what am I going to be able to do, and what can I do, or what can I not do? Because you don't want to also be sitting down all the time just looking.
Right. All right. Well, we've got some questions from the attendees, so I'm going to start with some of our students who are here today. First, Diana Trejo asks, are broadcast internships opening back up soon? And that sort of dovetails with the question I had about internships during the pandemic. Do they exist at all? Michael kind of touched on this at the start. But where are we right now? We're starting to come out of the pandemic. Are we going to see more internships in broadcast in the next few months that are going to be available?
I'm hopeful that we will. I mean, just speaking for our shop, we the structure of the newsroom internship didn't really make a lot of sense to do remotely. We do have one internship program that's still going, that's more research based, so it was a natural fit to keep going remotely. But our hope, the latest that I've heard, is that we're hoping to have interns back for the fall semester. So, and if vaccination rates and numbers are good, I guess it's possible that we could have something earlier than that, maybe for part of the summer, because we do have summer intern, we have year round, and it's generally the fall semester, the spring semester, and then a summer internship. So I'm hopeful that we will be having folks back in the building for internships in the fall.
Jennifer and Michael, what are you hearing with regards to this? Are you hearing that things are is it possible right now to get an internship? Or is this something that we should wait, that students should wait on for a couple of months?
Well, Jennifer posted the list of some stations that have opportunities open. Those might be jobs rather than internships. But I'm hearing anecdotally that certainly by the fall, internships are expected to open back up at a number of workplaces, not just broadcast workplaces. So I think that's a hopeful sign. Organizations such as Nexstar, which operates WGN, has some opportunities out there right now. Some of them aren't in Chicago, but sometimes it's worth looking at larger organizations that may have internships in the region or nearby, because often some of those internships are remote. And if they're remote, even though you're in Chicago, you can still work the internship and still get some things done. So it's important to look at the larger organizations for those purposes. On the other end of that spectrum, it's also worthwhile to look at smaller stations, markets in the Quad Cities, markets in Central Illinois that have opportunities, not only entry-level opportunities, but internship opportunities. So we try to pay attention to those smaller markets in Wisconsin, in the Quad Cities and in Central Illinois that may have opportunities available.
And I would encourage folks too, this isn't necessarily specifically related to when internships are coming back, but if you're a student in Chicago or in the Midwest and you're not originally from here, we often have interns who come to us for the summer who are, from the area and are back for the summer, but don't go to school here. We're absolutely open to that. It does not have to be an area school, just someone who is studying something or has the interest in working at a station like ours. So, if you're headed home for the summer, whether it's this summer or next, I'd encourage you to, take a look at those stations as well.
And I will just add that I noticed when I was looking, and I apologize, I didn't put Nexstar in there. That would be another good link to be checking. But when I search, for example, NBC, let's just say NBC Telemundo's website, I will encourage students to do two separate searches, one on internships and see what pops up, because then you'll get the nationally competitive ones, and you might also come across ones in different regions, and then also search by specific city without the word internship, just in case it's been, somebody forgot to check a box that said internship, so you can see what's available in the cities that you're looking. I have seen a couple coming up for like in Philadelphia and San Diego when I think when I was searching that NBC site. So it's just interesting what cities are opening things up, and the ones that I've seen are remote. So it's definitely worth checking and seeing what's out there now.
Okay, another question from an attendee. Would an internship at a certain news organization ever bar you from being accepted at another news organization? That's a very good question for Jennifer or Michael, or both.
Oh, I've never seen that happen. I'd be really interested also in what Nick and Pablo have to say, but I have never seen that happen. I have seen, because journalism is such a small world, I've seen things that interns have done, sort of follow them along after their internship, because it's a small world in broadcast journalism or in any journalism. And, you just kind of want to be aware of, what the professionalism you're showing. And anyway, that's probably another story. But I've seen information about an intern follow, but not having to do with which network or station they were affiliated with.
Yeah, I've never heard about that either. I'll be interested to hear what Nick and Pablo have to say about that. But I would agree. Do not burn your bridges when you have your internship. If it turns out to be a bad internship, just take it and go with it, and be careful not to badmouth anybody, because that, as Jennifer said, that will and can follow you and hurt your chances at future employment somewhere else.
I do agree. Like Michael said, don't burn your bridges. This is a small industry. I mean, big stations, but it's small. You'll be working in your career with many people again and again, because everything moves around. And yes, absolutely, you don't want to be bad mouthing.
Yeah, I have not heard of anyone not getting an opportunity because of a specific organization for which they've worked. My sense, based on the question, is that, if you're working for an organization that is seen to have some sort of a political bias, whether that would be an issue there. I think that the question is just, what sort of work were you doing? Was it something that was on the news side? I mean, the commonly cited example is, is it Fox or is it MSNBC, in terms of having a political bias? Although I think perhaps one much more so than the other. But they both have news organizations within those stations. And I think if you're working on that side, that's not really an issue. as long as you're working for sort of a reputable organization, even if they have, opinion shows or, reputations in certain ways, I don't think that would be a problem, especially because it is, and this is not to devalue internships, but, it's something that you do for a period of, 14, 15 weeks. It's not necessarily somewhere that you've spent, 8 or 10 years of your career. So I would not anticipate that kind of hesitancy.
And then a related question, how many internships can one take in the same place? Should you be discouraged from applying for another internship at the same organization if you've already been there once?
I know there are programs where you can come back every summer for 4 years. However, I know that at NBC Universal, you can only take one internship, and you cannot reapply for that same internship or in the same station.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we would have anyone come back multiple times as a newsroom intern, but there are other internships within the station that you're absolutely free to apply to. I think it's just a question of, some shops there is a recurring element to it, and some places I think you can do different things within the same organization. And in some places that's even, I think encouraged and rightly so. So that's again, a question to ask, before you apply or during the interview process.
Yeah, at Loyola, going back to the same company for an internship is discouraged in that it won't help you fulfill your academic requirement to go back and do that internship again. It won't do anything to help you meet your criteria to graduate.
So a question from an attendee: how early can one get started in an internship? How early in that person's career as a student? Because there's some resumes lately where we've seen kids with internships in high school kids getting internships. How early can one get started with applying for an internship? Senior in high school? Freshman in college? What's the limit?
My own experience, and I apologize, I had answered somebody's question in a private message, and then it disappeared, and I wanted to hear what the other panelists had to say, so I'm gonna put that back into the
Okay.
chat, John.
Sure.
So I always tell students that it depends on their availability and what they feel is that they're realistically ready for. If a student is a first year and they come to me and they're like, I've got my classes under control, I'm ready for an internship, can we look at things? I do know realistically that probably an internship at WTTW or Telemundo might be a little out of, if they haven't had a previous internship or if they haven't had much classwork, that might be a little out of their range. It might be aspirational. But if they are thinking about internships in terms of stepping stones into those sorts of roles, then if they make the case that they have the time and that they're not going to be overburdened, like some of the panelists have said when they've seen interns that have just too much going on, then I think that's the right time for them to find an internship. And there's plenty of need out there, especially in a city like Chicago. I mean, I'm contacted pretty much every day by people who want interns in the communication field. So starting to get there, to build skills in that real world way, I would say there's not really a right answer time-wise or when in terms of your school career, in my opinion. It's more about what your availability is. At Columbia, we do require that students have 30 credit hours under their belt and a certain GPA before they can earn credit for an internship. But I take those cases on a just individual basis all the time.
We have a similar requirement for 4 credit internships at Loyola.
Now, the question that you referred to, Jennifer, it was again from Deanna Trejo about, she says, I have 10 years experience in unrelated office work prior to returning to school. Would it help or hinder to include that prior unrelated experience in my resume for an internship? I know
I
Jennifer
would,
in the chat Q&A field, but what are the others? What do the other panelists think about this?
I would say to include it. I mean, and as much as you can, as you do with any item on your resume, you want to describe what you did, in a way that helps people to understand how those skills might be applied to their organization. And I mean, that's a good thing to do for any resume, even if you're applying for a job, once you're already into your career, in the field that you'd like to be in. I don't think that's a hindrance at all, and I don't think it should be. We've had interns and part-timers and folks who have come from another career and went back to school or wanted to make a shift or what have you. I don't think that should be a knock at all. I would just encourage you to think about what you've done and how that can be applied to the organizations that you're interested in interning for, because that'll show them, here's what I bring to the table, even though my prior professional experience isn't necessarily related to this. But yeah, I say go for it.
Same here. I think so. I think it's important, like Nick said, especially if it's customer service. We're all into that customer service. We have to be very good at it. It doesn't matter where you're at, what industry, So yeah, put it there. Don't be afraid.
Okay, another question. Is it rare for a student to get an internship when they don't have a lot of experience or media projects under their belt to showcase? Additionally, do you recommend any specific media projects to have ready to submit to internship applications?
Well, you know what? In my case, it's okay. Well, like Jennifer said, you are required to have certain hours or certain things, in order to apply. But don't forget, you're still a student, so you're there to learn, and we're gonna help you grow. We're gonna help you learn. You don't have to already know. You'll learn. That's all I can say.
And I don't know that there are necessarily requirements for you should have X, Y, and Z ready to go when you apply. I think one thing that we often look for, especially for someone who's on the younger side, or not necessarily younger, but someone who's earlier on in their academic career, have you been involved at all in terms of campus organizations? Like, is there a student newspaper? Is there a student TV station? Is there a student radio station? Is there some sort of a magazine that you can work with? Because I think that's another good way, even if you don't have prior internships, you can have some examples of your work, and also you can just sort of demonstrate your abilities and your responsibility and the fact that you can take these projects on. So I think, and having having had experience myself working, doing my whole freshman year working for the campus radio station, not working because I wasn't paid, but volunteering for the campus radio station, I think that was a big help in terms of getting that first internship.
Okay. Another question from an attendee. What type of internship would you recommend for someone who wants to explore video editing? It's a very specific question about internships.
I'll just jump in from the internship advisor side, because I do see many, well, in talking to alumni from Columbia, as well as recruiters, it does seem like there are many producer jobs open. Like that is a field that is ripe for getting hired if you're willing to relocate. And so I would think that video editing in general would be helpful, just a great skill to have. I personally do see a lot of paid video editing internships out there that are not part of the journalism world. I think the union rules, and I'll let others talk to this, would be hard in terms of you actually being at a station and doing video editing. I could be wrong, but I think that that's what I've heard. But any video editing experience you can get, period. And like I said, just looking at, I don't know what schools everyone goes to, but whatever school you go to, surely there is an internship and job board, or I don't know if you use Handshake or other platforms, but you should be able to do a search and find video editing internships in general that are paid. I know that answers a different question. I've seen many of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important to look at non-traditional places. Maybe not stations, maybe not broadcast media per se. Look beyond those fields to other fields that in their internship description or in their position description will mention video editing. It takes some extra research, but it's worth that extra research to check those out. You may find companies like as disparate as Ace Hardware, as equipment companies who are looking for a communications intern. And when you open it up and look inside, you find out that there is a video component, there's a video editing component to that job. So it's an extra layer of looking and going deeper beyond just seeing a broadcast station. Look to some of the non-traditional posts and see if you can find it there. And as Jennifer said, establish a relationship with your internship and career coordinator so that he or she is on the lookout for video editing jobs that may be with non-traditional companies, and they can flag them for you when they see them.
A question that our executive director, Rebecca Cowing, gets on occasion from prospective interns. If I'm only getting coffee every day, how can I politely ask for more responsibility? That's a sort of a dead end for interns where they end up being gophers. How do they get out of that responsibility of being a gopher, and how can they politely ask for more responsibilities with regards to their actual field?
I think you can politely ask for more responsibility. I mean, I think part of it starts with the interview process too, and just saying like, well, here are the things that I'm interested in, here are the things that I'd like to pursue, because that can plant a seed. And even if the job is really gopher based and just getting coffee and running and whatever, like doing, those sorts of tasks that aren't necessarily related to broadcasting or to journalism or whatever you're interested in, I think that gives you more, you've established that beachhead when you want to come back to that with your supervisor and say, hey, I'm really interested in doing X, Y, and Z, and I was wondering what you'd like me to do there. I also think part of it too, there's a little bit of an element of like reading the room, where especially in a news organization, if stories are breaking or if stuff's blowing up and we're just going like crazy, like that's not a great time for you to mosey by and ask me, if they can help me out with something when I'm like crashing on editing a package that needs to be on the air in 45 minutes. But I mean, take advantage of those opportunities when it's a little bit of an easier, less hectic time.
Yeah, I would add to that also. It's time, if you're at a station, television station, there are many departments, so ask, can I shadow somebody at this department or another department, so that you can be proactive about wanting to learn and taking the most advantage of it.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes a fear of like, I don't want to get too big for my britches, or I don't want to, piss off my coordinator or my supervisor. And I think if you do it politely and professionally and they react poorly, that reflects poorly on them, not on you. And don't burn bridges, and don't lose your professionalism just because they didn't respond to it well. But I think that points to, that might not be an organization where you want to work, or might not be a person that you're going to build much of a relationship with anyhow. So don't be afraid. You might see it as a risk. And I think if you approach it with professionalism, it is absolutely worth doing.
And if you're taking the internship for credit, so there's an established program that you're part of. You probably have an intern class at school for this internship, and you have an internship advisor. Let the advisor, don't hesitate to let the advisor know that this is what you're facing, that you were maybe promised something going in at the internship, all these great duties that you'd be doing, but it's turned out to be fetching coffee and copies. Let your internship coordinator know, and he or she can help you fight that battle.
That's a good point. We're working with your internship coordinator to make sure that there isn't any abuse happening. That's a very good thought. Stephen Petty asks, are there also internships for people who have graduated? So people not in school anymore, are there internships available for people who are early in their career who've gotten out of school?
I've noticed that seems to be an evolving situation. I used to see within recent years that the Chicago area stations were looking for people within schools, but the ABC 7 affiliate was looking, they were open to people who had just graduated. So that can kind of sometimes depend on what your situation, on individual stations and where they're at. But that seems like in the last year that's opened a bit more, and that might be a reflection of the situation with the pandemic and many internships being closed off last summer. So that kind of is evolving.
Yeah, I'm seeing more, not a lot, but I'm seeing more internships that are aimed at graduates. So a lot of times you just got to look. When we post them on our jobs board, we try to say graduate internship on the listing to signal to the student that this is what's available. And I think it was Nick who mentioned earlier that many organizations offer fellowships, and those fellowships are often directed at graduates. So be aware of those fellowships. They tend to be longer term. They tend to be more responsibilities, and they may be just hand in hand for you if you're a graduate.
So sometimes, well, I always ask people if they're coming to me with a question like that, of what they are hoping to get out of an internship after graduation. If they are hoping that they're going to get an internship with, let's just say, a network, and then sort of leapfrog into a job at a network from that, versus going out and starting to work at a local station, and gaining actual experience. That's an interesting conversation, because if the best way to work your way into the field is by actually doing work. So I understand completely the temptation to do more internships, perhaps at larger visibility stations or at networks. But the truth is, there are jobs out there. So if you have the skills, you may want to be looking for a job rather than an internship. So that depends on individual circumstances. And I do want to just take this quick chance to say, I often get queries from people who didn't go to the school I work at, Columbia, and I'm happy to talk to everybody. And I'll get inquiries from parents, maybe people I know, coming to me and saying, well, so-and-so, their student or the student themselves, my career center, this is across the country, or the Career Center doesn't know what they're doing, or they don't help. There is, and I know Michael will agree with me, students' tuition pays our salaries. So, or at least at Columbia they do. So I have every incentive to help the students that are at my school. And I know that each of you who are in the audience who are students, that your Career Center is filled with people whose salaries you have paid. So I would really, really urge you to take advantage of the Career Centers, find out how you can tap into alumni networks. These are resources that not as many students know about or take advantage of as they should, and yet they are part of your tuition. So.
Okay, I have a question from Daryl Barnes, who asks, should students consider internships within the industry if they are not specifically what they want to do? So should a student who's interested in producing apply for an internship at a station in social media or digital media? Just to get their foot in the door.
I think it can be valuable. I mean, in some ways it can be to get your foot in the door. And I think it's also just valuable in terms of building up your base of skills. I'm sure this is something that you hear from lots of folks, either on panels or at your schools or whatever, but like nobody does just one job anymore. I mean, Pablo kind of, tipped his hat to that like no one's doing one thing. And I think the more skills that you have, the more valuable you are for internships, for fellowships, for jobs. People like to see that you have a broad base of abilities. So I don't think you should necessarily take something that's like completely off the wall and completely on the other side of the world from what you're interested in. But if you think, yeah, I'd like to be a reporter, but I'm going to do something where I'd like to be a broadcast reporter, but this is a great opportunity and it's writing for digital and there's a social media element. I think might like doing that. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes, I can add to that as well. I think it's fine. I mean, you might realize that producing is not for you anyway, but like if you're going for digital media and the example that Jan gave, or you wanted to be a producer and there's only an opening for digital, that's okay, take it. I had an intern in that he came from Columbia College actually, and he just he just came into our department, to my department, and yeah, he learned everything. He was really good at it. We ended up hiring him part-time. Then there was an opening somewhere in, I think it was Colorado, for a journalist opening, a startup. It was a small station back then, and he went for it. He applied. He got it. He learned everything he needed to be to become a journalist. 3 years later, he came back to Chicago. Now he's our anchor. So yeah, it's a great story. And I remember Alfonso Gutierrez. He's a really good example of someone that really is like the industry as a whole and not just one thing, and was open-minded to go and learn everything he could and even go beyond. So, and I'm not saying that becoming an anchor is more than what other things you can do, of course not, but that's what he wanted to do, and that's a good example. I always put him as a good example.
All right, we have a question from Hannah Jiang, who asks, how do news organizations coordinate with international students who are seeking internships? Are there specific internships that are directed towards international students? This is more of a Jennifer Michael question, I believe.
Well, I've seen, I don't know that I've seen one right answer for this, because in all the years that I've been doing this, it seems like things have shifted around in terms of what stations were wanting to do. I know that international students have done journalism internships, but sometimes I can think of one specific situation where I think I did have to intervene to clarify that the student was getting academic credit and it was all part of curricular practicum training. So I would approach that, I guess individually, but I know that they have done them. One possible place to look at for more guidance would be in the groups. And if anyone joined too late to see the chat, I can resend different groups such as National Association of Hispanic Journalists, National Association of Black Journalists that have special internship programs or scholarships or advice on careers. But I know that's not a very solid, straightforward answer. That's something I've also seen evolve.
I'm curious what Nick and Pablo have to say about that. What's the policy at your station on working with international students?
I don't know that we have a set policy, but we've absolutely had international students that have worked with us as interns. I think generally the interns that we have come to us through their college or university. But yeah, I mean, it's not I think there may be an extra, form or two to fill out, but there's no, we have no restrictions on it, of which I'm aware.
Same here. I don't know that there are restrictions for that. I would have to ask human resources for that answer.
And Jennifer mentioned the different links that she sent out earlier in the chat field. Please, attendees, copy the different links to news stations and organizations that offer partnership in the internships with news organizations. It's in the chat field. So please try to copy that before we end the call. And we do have a few more questions. We might go a little bit over, a couple of minutes over. We're supposed to end at 12:30, but I'd like to answer a few of these questions if the panelists don't mind. First, John Glenke asked, are there summer internships upcoming in person or remote? And we sort of touched on this earlier. I mean, due to the pandemic, internships have been limited, but we'll touch on that again. Are there summer internships that you know of that are upcoming either in person or virtually?
The ones that I found that are broadcast related have been virtual for the upcoming summer.
And that's is that the same with Loyola, Michael?
Yes, most of the times they're remote still. Some shops in advertising and PR and all fields are opening up a little bit and having them in person, but most of them are still remote. We are still getting hearing about summer internships. I assume we'll be hearing from the last of them right now because they have to interview them and get them in place in order to start in late May or early June. But we are still hearing from some companies who are still doing summer internships. So it's just important to keep checking your job board or checking in with your coordinator and advisor to see what the opportunities are.
Okay. Diana Trejo asks, what kind of internship and work experience is ideal for news producer roles? So a person starting off a career as a news producer, what kind of internship opportunities should they have on their resume?
I think you want to have a resume that demonstrates that you've done internships with organizations where you've learned skills that you could apply to a news producing job. And the issue there is that news producer can be a pretty broad term depending on the station that you're working for, depending on the show that you're working for. So I would, and it can be difficult because there are only so many jobs and you might take a job that's not a perfect fit for you, but I would encourage you to, do a little bit of research in terms of, okay, do I want to be working for, do I want to be working, as Jennifer said, like maybe try and get in with the network and do something entry level? Do I want to go to work for a smaller station and kind of work my way up through local news? Try to do some research in terms of what aspect of producing you'd like to do. Do you want to be doing field work? Do you want to be doing, work where you're doing something for, one of the news broadcasts, in a different day part? Do you want to be doing something that's a little more feature heavy, or do you want to do something that's newsier? Internships can help you determine that, and they can also demonstrate that you've got experience when you're looking for a producing job. That experience as an intern that aligns with what the position you're going for is. But similar to taking advantage of prior job experience that you have and tailoring it toward the organization that you're applying for, there are a lot of skills that news producers need to have that can be applied to different kinds of jobs. So in some ways, it's a question of tailoring your resume and making sure that companies see why you have the right experience for the kind of producing opportunity that they have open.
Yeah, I would add to that, if you're getting an internship at a news station, it would be on the news department, in the news department. If it's assignment desk or shadowing a reporter, you're gonna need all that experience to be a news producer anyway. So it doesn't matter as long as you're taking an internship in the news environment.
And then our final question is from Liam Brees. We didn't talk a lot about film. I know that we're primarily have primarily talked about broadcast, but if anyone can talk about film production, is applying for an internship with like a documentary house, is that similar to a broadcast house? The specific question is for students going into a cinema production field, would anything change from what's been said about broadcast?
From what I've seen, if you are interested in documentary work, then it is going to be a pretty similar skill set, and so it wouldn't differ too much. But I also have been told that at Columbia, we have a separate internship advisor for cinema students. And the point that she's made several times is when you're applying for internships there, try not to only go for like the Universal Studios. Find out like what were the secondary studios or production houses that were involved in productions you like, and go in that way. Maybe some of the lesser known, because that's a good way to broaden the range of things that you're applying for, and possibly not get lost in the shuffle of only the most super competitive internships, but looking into those that maybe aren't household names and that you could go for.
Okay. Well, the panel discussion was supposed to end at 12:30, so we went a little over. But before we leave, I just wanted to see if our panelists had any final words of advice or encouragement for our attendees out there who are interested in applying for internships, starting with Nick.
I think the running theme of what I always think about and what I've said a lot of today is don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask and try and make introductions. And you're not always going to succeed. You might not always get the internship that you want. You might not always get the kinds of opportunities within that internship that you want, but don't be afraid to speak up and to ask questions and to try and get involved. I think there's a natural, especially too, I think when you're first starting off, there's a little bit of that imposter syndrome of like, well, I'm just an intern and I don't know what I'm doing. Well, guess what? Nobody knew what they were doing when they started this. Nobody was born knowing how to be a producer or a reporter or an anchor or a shooter or an editor. Everybody learned. So don't be afraid to maximize your ability and your opportunities to learn.
Pablo.
I would say get to your credits as soon as possible to be able to take as many internships as possible. Even if they are unpaid, it's okay. It might be the best internship for you to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life. So it's fine, it's okay. But yes, take as many internships as possible as you can, so that they can make you, so that they can help you make a decision.
Michael.
Yeah, it's important during the time of pandemic to be patient but persistent in your pursuit. You know, you may get a lot of no's, you may get a lot of silence. You may not hear back from applications that you make. Don't take it personally. Companies are doing the best to work with the staffs that they already have, let alone bringing new staff members on. So that may be why you're not hearing back from people, why you're just getting silence. So after the appropriate amount of time, 5 business days, 7 business days, if you haven't heard back from an organization that you applied to, don't be hesitant to follow up, either by email or better by phone if possible. That's why it's so important to do your homework and see who the hiring managers are so you can contact them directly. But be patient, but be persistent and keep looking.
And finally, Jennifer, who is also in the chat field, she has her email address available to attendees who want to contact her or connect. But Jennifer, your final thoughts.
I would just say I echo everything that the other panelists said. And then as far as job searching, if you could keep in mind that journalism happens everywhere. So you may want to start out in a large market. Your opportunities may be in smaller markets. You're going to find stories that are going to give you a terrific resume and reel for that next position if you don't want to stay in that small market that you start. So I would recommend being open-minded for those entry-level jobs. I would also say if you decide against journalism, I can't think of one journalism class or internship or job that has ever been a waste for anyone I know. And I know a lot of journalists over the past decades. It is such an exciting career and a great background for lots of other careers. So kudos to all of you for being interested in journalism and possibly starting a career there. And do feel free to reach out on LinkedIn to me or by email. I'm happy to answer follow-up questions.
Wonderful. Well, thanks to our panel. Thanks, Jennifer Halperin, Michael Limon, Pablo Alfaro, and Nick Blumberg. And then Michael has also added his email address to the chat field. So feel free to contact either Michael or Jennifer if you have any other questions regarding internships. So thank you all for attending. We're continuing our spring series of workshops next week. Our colleagues in the Suncoast chapter are doing a workshop on podcasting, creating your own podcast. So please try to join up for that event. And then on the 17th, we have the Society of Professional Journalists, Mike Riley. We're partnering with him again for his popular series of Google Tools seminars. And this time he's doing a seminar on Google Earth Pro. So you'll definitely want to make that. So pay attention to our website for more information. And then we'll also have email blasts out to our members with more information about these events. So thank you so much to everybody, to our panelists and our attendees, and enjoy the beautiful day that we're gonna have today. So thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, good to see everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.